Hello and welcome to this week's episode of We Used to Be Journos. I am Jan Fran. I am one half of your hosting duo. If you don't know who I am, good for you, truly, at this point, because I'm just a sad and angry and disillusioned person.
Oh, you're so much more than that.
But I'm 90% that.
Okay, but when you're not sad, angry and disillusioned, you're also an incredibly accomplished broadcaster, a Walkley Award-winning opinion haver.
Oh, stop.
And my friend for many, many years. I am Antoinette Lattouf. I'm probably best known for taking the ABC to the federal court and winning. But this podcast, even though we are going to speak about my case in the second half, it's really about unpacking the media, its coverage, critiquing it, and analysing how it is served and how it is made so that you can digest it properly.
And we're trying to find the tagline for this podcast, and we're like, okay, we used to be journos, media tea.
Hot and scalding and poured weekly.
Yeah, or, we used to be journos, now we just bitch about them. No, not quite right.
Yeah.
We used to be journos, two people who break news but also broken by the news. That's
Yeah.
too long. Anyway, we'll work it out. We'll work out what the tagline is. But the point is, it's media analysis, critique and literacy, and that's ideally what we hope to do with it moving forward. However, as Antoinette just said, this is going to be a bit of an anomaly episode as well, because last week, if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, by the way, what are you doing? You should go back and listen to it. But we did say that there was an element of last week's podcast, which was this kind of prevailing ethos that you shouldn't have been fired, but you shouldn't have been hired in the first place. Because
I get so angry just hearing you say it. But yes, I will reserve that anger for a little bit.
reserve, channel, focus, all of these things.
Oh, there is a bit of positive news. So why don't we start with that? We did debut at number 1 in news on Apple Podcast. And last time I checked, we were still there. So it is incredible that so many of you tuned in and you've been sending amazing sort of messages of support and love. We love the love. We love the messages. And Jan, it's kind of nice it's quite reaffirming to think that we are doing something that I think is lacking in the media landscape. Like we thought it was a great idea, but we think everything we do is a great idea. But it seems as though,
Debatable, but yes.
but it seems as though it's it's something that people are really craving.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to, take stock of the fact that the first episode was the first, potentially only, I don't know, but the main interview that you gave after your federal court win. So I imagine there would have been a lot of people tuning in to, hear all of the tidbits about that and hear us unpack that particular saga. And we hope that you guys stick around, basically, because, we want to be able to do, I was going to say we want to be able to do more of that moving forward, but we don't actually.
Yeah,
we want to talk about you less.
Yeah, I'm sick of talking about myself, which is strange for somebody like me. And so we'll do it in this episode.
Yeah. Just on the point of, acknowledging some of the listenership though. I mean, I feel like you were just downplaying it a little bit because I'm completely blown away. Like, not just by the number of people that have listened to the podcast. I mean, we ended up second on the charts, pipped only by the mushroom lady. Last I checked, we were still number 7 or whatever it was. That's huge.
Yeah.
We were most shared on Spotify.
Yeah.
We had so many people in the DMs and in emails.
And tuning in on YouTube.
And tuning on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like, we've only just started our YouTube channel, by the way. You should go
Yeah.
and subscribe. We've only just started. We hardly have anything up there. I'm embarrassed to say. But, we had, 8,000 people who watched the video on YouTube. And not to mention all of the people that have just reached out to just congratulate and say thanks and also just offer up their services. Like, this is what I'm most blown away by. People who are like, how can I help? What can I do? How can I assist you?
And it's amazing because some is like really practical support. Like, I'm a journalist, I work in social media, I work in marketing. Other people are like, I don't know how I can support, but like, I'm a landscaper. And it's just well, we don't have a garden just yet. It is something that we're working on at Media, having big grounds.
Yeah.
But it's amazing that people want to feel part of something. They want to feel part of the change. Although what I suspect won't change is the mushroom murder lady being in number 1 because she has now been found to be a murderer.
She's a murderer as found by the court.
The court,
Mm-hmm,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I know that podcasters have loved covering her daily. Last time I checked, there are at least 6 daily podcasts about her. People love true crime. I haven't listened to anything. I haven't followed anything.
You know what? Neither have I. And I feel like I'm just deeply out of touch with the Australian public, but I have not listened to a single episode or watched a single news story that is related to and or adjacent in any way to mushrooms. Haven't done it.
No.
Not out of like defiance or anything. I
same.
just don't really care that much.
But I don't bemoan or criticise those who do. Like we do as Australians, we love true crime. True crime fiction is, also true crime non-fiction or even crime fiction flies off the shelf. All crime flies off the shelves. True crime podcasts are constantly topping charts. I think people really love this story because she seems like such a kind of like a fuddy-duddy, and I know that's such a fuddy-duddy word, regional mum, and like mushrooms are the most boring of vegetables, and she, the court has found, killed a bunch of in-laws with vegetables. And so the commercials have been loving it, the commercial television networks, because I happened to, at the gym, notice that 7 News was like, we have our reporters at all the key locations. And then up on the screen was just like, doosh, 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 all the reporters going, we are covering this at all angles. I think there were 4
reporters.
Yeah.
And what were the locations? What are the mushroom locations?
One was the house where she had them for lunch.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Fair.
I think one was
Court, probably the court.
I honestly don't know the other key locations, like the mushroom aisle at the supermarket. Like,
Was
I don't
someone
know.
there?
No. They weren't there. But I was just like, when I heard that, I was like, all the key locations. I was like, the bathroom where they then threw up before they died. Like, so RIP, people died. But I was just like, the saturation and the wall-to-wall coverage of this was hilarious.
Okay, I mean, it's such an indictment on the news that I actually thought for a second that a reporter could have very well been standing in a mushroom aisle.
Well,
at the supermarket.
I worked in commercial TV news, and this is it. I could confidently say that it's not something I would rule out doing when I was there, because like, where could we go? And you would literally just stand anywhere that had, she once walked past this street, so we're now standing at the street.
Sure. I mean, in all of this, I know we're sort of, I kind of just feel a bit bad talking about this, because it's like people were killed. People were killed. Now the court has found people were killed.
Yeah,
like
they
died. They're like no longer with us.
Yep.
And I don't know, there's a kind of a flippancy to which we sort of talk about it. Like, we kind of did that here a bit, so I apologise.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. It's not flippant.
No, it's not.
I like to say that no news is good news. And all news is bad news. So we have some news and it's bad news.
Yeah, so let's start with this segment. Bad news BYO. That's what I'm calling it, Jan.
BYO, bad news. Bringing an item from the week's news that is no good. That is no. That is a no from me.
So, Jan, you go first.
Well, the thing that I want to talk about, the reporting that caught my eye, particularly over the weekend, was relating to an incident that happened in Melbourne, a series of incidents that happened in Melbourne, specifically an attack on a synagogue, the East Melbourne synagogue. There was, liquid fuel thrown on the front door. It was set on fire. There were people inside. I think there were 20 people inside.
Yeah, and some kids.
Including children who were just sitting down for a meal.
Yeah,
it was
terrible,
fucked.
frightening, yeah.
Right? And then there were 2 other incidents where a restaurant was stormed, and there was a particular location that was vandalised and cars set on fire. So there was a number of incidents that happened in and around Melbourne, right? That's the background to the reporting. What I want to talk about is the way in which it was reported by The Age. And I want to focus specifically on The Age because it is, the Melbourne newspaper of note, and it's probably important that we just stick with the newspaper within that city, right? The place that I want to start with some of what I thought was, call it interesting coverage, eyebrow-raising coverage, is Instagram. With the caveat that Instagram is not the only place that one should get their news, but that was where I first saw a lot of the reporting.
And to be fair, a lot of people get most of their news, particularly Gen Z, Gen Y, they get most of their news from social media.
Right.
But it can also then point back to the website, theage.com.au. But
Sure.
majority of people do see it where you saw it.
Yeah, exactly. So as of this morning, we're recording Tuesday morning, depending on when you're listening to this, there might be more. But as of this morning, there were 5 stories on The Age's Instagram page, right? And the Instagram page is obviously very curated. As we said, there are way more stories on the Ages
Way
website and
more.
the paper. And the ones that get chosen to be on the Instagram page, there's obviously a deliberate choice made as to why they should be there.
Yeah, and a deliberate choice of elevating and prominence. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the first one was synagogue targeted, CBD restaurant stormed in anti-Semitic attack, right? Just top line, these are things that happened. The second story on the Ages Instagram page is a response from not the Premier of Victoria, not the Prime Minister of Australia, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And there is a quote that is included where he says, the reprehensible anti-Semitic attacks with calls of death to the IDF and an attempt to attack a place of worship are severe hate crimes that must be uprooted. Right? That's the second story. The third story is protesters continue anti-IDF chant at rally after anti-Semitic attacks. The fourth story is Jacinta Allen visits shul as an anti-hate task force to be established. And the fifth story is police told not to confront protesters before restaurant rampage.
So much confusion, but also so many questions.
So many questions. And I guess if you're just getting your news from Instagram, which I don't recommend anyone do, like what is the messaging that you get from those 5 articles in succession? You get, here's a terrible thing that had happened. Let's...
multiple terrible
here's
things.
multiple things that happened. Let's be deferential to Benjamin Netanyahu, wanted war criminal, by the way.
Yeah.
Protesters are highly questionable. New task force established, what's the minister going to do? And police probably not doing enough. That's the messaging that I got. And our readers can tell me whether or not I'm, being unfair in my interpretation of all of these articles in succession. The one that pinged my attention first, can you guess?
Bibi.
Oh, God, do not call him that.
Genocide adjacent Bibi.
Do not call him that.
What about genocide adjacent Bibi?
Oh, my God.
Is that all right?
Well, I think...
It's a bit more contextual. It's giving more context than the Instagram post from The Age.
Just be factual and just say
Wanted
internationally...
war criminal?
Yeah. Internationally wanted war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. The thing that piqued my attention was exactly that one, where I thought to myself, why on earth is the second story that appears on the Age's Instagram account in this moment a direct quote from Benjamin Netanyahu, who is being credibly accused of genocide, an internationally wanted war criminal, and forgive me, has absolutely no standing to be talking about attacks on places of worship.
Yeah, and between October 2023 and March 2024, just in that period, more than 1,000 mosques were completely levelled. And that's not obviously taking into account the attacks on Christian places of worship. You remember those 2 Palestinian women, mother and daughter, who were killed. They were inside a church. Soldiers went and shot them. So when he says an attempt to attack a place of worship, brother, you've done more than attempt to attack places of worship. You have leveled them, flattened them, and killed anyone next to or within them. So maybe shut the hell up.
But also it's a question for the Age, like why was there so much deference and prominence afforded to this particular person? I'm not saying that they shouldn't have reported on what his commentary is. I mean, he's, a relevant player in all of this to some extent.
Maybe it's like 3/4 down within an article and then the qualification afterwards that he's a wanted war criminal who routinely and continually attacks places of worship.
Right.
That is the context.
I saw it and I kind of felt like, are they trolling me personally? Like, is this what is happening?
But also, do they think that especially on Instagram, people have not seen said places of worship and children and arms and legs and whatever being recovered from them? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, this
kind of approach may have worked in 2003, but it doesn't work now.
Yes,
and I think that's the important point.
People have seen too much. People know that context, so that when it's kind of not there, it feels conspicuous that it's not there. Or at the very least, that's how it felt to me. And then you get to the Age's website, right? So this is Monday morning. And let's just specifically focus on Monday morning because it's a particular time for news consumption.
Yeah.
People are...
Biggest news consumption day generally. Yeah.
That makes sense. After the weekend, people are, reading... catching up, doing all of that sort of stuff. There were 10 articles on these incidents, right? 10 articles on the Age's website, including 3 op-eds, and 2 of those op-eds were written either by the Age itself or by Age staff. There was also a letters page. So this is the letters to the editor, right? That the people, the public, can write in. The letters page was titled, "Melbourne is no longer a haven for Jews." And if you clicked on that letters page, a bunch of other letters come up. And I just want to read you the titles of those letters. Melbourne is no longer a haven for Jews. The second one, not helping the Palestinian cause. The third one, our multicultural community is a privilege. The fourth one, violence is counterproductive. The fifth one, peaceful, not violent opposition. And the sixth one, keep city inclusive. So you kind of get this picture of, you know, a city that is fractured. A fracturing city.
And we should be grateful. People should be grateful if they're allowed to live in Melbourne. And this is not helping Palestinians, and in no way has it actually centred or suggested what that Palestinian cause is or what it is that's mobilising people to protest for 90 weeks.
Right. So there
Straight.
was no indication of, you know, why there might perhaps be people protesting. And look, the letters to the editor come from people. So I don't know how many people sent letters to the editor.
And we don't know if they were all unanimous, which is what the selection to be published suggests. And we will never know because that's not something that
Yeah, I don't think I can just like email, "Hello, The Age, can you please tell me all of the letters to the editor that you received on this date?" Well, I mean, we could ask the question, I suppose. But the bigger question is just, again, around selection.
Yes.
Selection
and
of...
it's not just about these letters to the editor. It's this off the back of the Instagram choices, off the back of 10 stories,
Exactly.
and opinion pieces. It builds a picture of a independent always, The Age, going, it feels like you kind of have a stake in this, or it feels like you kind of have a position in this. I don't know. Am I being unfair to say that maybe have a position on this?
What an interesting question. Because on Monday pops up an Age editorial, right?
Okay.
Which is the Age's position.
Oh,
it's the
okay.
Age's opinion. So this
I
is the
haven't read that.
newspaper
Yeah.
that had written an editorial, right?
Oh, so it has the what is it? The Age's view.
The
or whatever.
Age's view, I believe.
Okay, they have an opinion. Cool.
So they have a view, and their view is
Pray
that
tell.
it was titled "Sunday's Gaza Protest, a Glaring Example of Tone-Deaf Intransigence." What I'd like to do, and I realise that we've talked about this for some time, but what I'd like to do is to kind of just go through some of the key bits of this op-ed and just break them down.
Oh, I feel like this is going to hurt my heart, but okay, keep going.
Okay, let's start with how it opens. Okay. It starts with the streets of Melbourne fell victim on Sunday to a glaring example of tone-deaf intransigence. Okay, so already we're starting with the victim here is the entire city of Melbourne, is the streets of Melbourne. And when you fall victim, what that implies is that there is an aggressor.
Yeah, there's a perpetrator.
Yeah, and here the perpetrator of this aggression against the city of Melbourne are the protesters. Okay. Yesterday, of all days, they should have paused. No actions are taken in isolation. There is always context. So that's the crux of their argument, is that the protest, following the events of what happened on Friday night, the protest should not have gone on. The editorial then goes on to say, on Friday night in Melbourne, 3 attacks occurred against Jewish people. To march 2 days later shows an appalling lack of judgment by protesters and organisers. Instead of thinking, what is the consequence of our actions in light of what happened on Friday, they went blinkered onto the streets. The opening line of that piece is, on Friday night, 3 attacks occurred against Jewish people, right? In my view, there's been some very crucial context omitted here. The first attack was against a synagogue. This is clearly an attack against Jewish people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a full stop at the end of that sentence. It's fucked. It's anti-Semitic. The second attack was, or I guess incident, whatever it is that you want to call it, was when protesters crashed a restaurant called Miznon, right? This restaurant is part owned by an Israeli man called Sahar Segal. Now, this man is the spokesperson for something called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. If that name sounds familiar to you,
does.
it does. That's because the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is the outfit, the Israeli-run and operated outfit that is supposedly delivering aid to Palestinians.
Okay.
But if you engaged in the news at all in the last few weeks, you would see the horror of what has happened under the auspices of those running this so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is
Like
that
shooting people who are lining up for food?
shooting people who are lining up for food. 613 people, according to the United Nations, 613 Palestinians have been shot and killed, or I don't know if all of them have been shot, but they've been killed. That's the number of dead aid seekers that have been killed.
And nowhere in those 10 articles, as far as you could see, or definitely not in this, was there any context provided as to who owned that restaurant and what happened, and that it may be an action
That was targeted at this particular restaurant for its
because of
involvement
it
in this
in-
particular foundation. None of that context was included in this particular piece.
Yeah.
There were other articles in The Age that had this context, and you had to scroll down a wee way to find them.
Yeah.
But in this piece, it was described as an attack on Jewish people. When those who had protested within that restaurant, who'd gone into that restaurant, had gone in because of the ties that one of the part owners had to this foundation that was deliberately, and this is according to Israeli soldiers, deliberately shooting and killing
Jesus
Palestinian
Christ.
people, right? So to describe it as an attack on Jewish people...
that is dishonest at best.
It feels dishonest. It feels like there is some very crucial context missing.
Okay, and then the third inverted commas attack?
Right. And so the third, I guess, incident was cars that had been set on fire and a wall that had been graffitied. And if you would like to ask me which wall.
A restaurant wall?
No.
Synagogue wall?
No. It was the wall of a place called Lattouf Technologies, which is a weapons company
Oh, please tell me. An Israeli weapons company?
with links to Israel.
Oh, for the
So
love of-
in these three incidents that The Age has outlined, happened on Friday, calling it an attack against Jewish people, two out of three of those incidents were either a weapons company that had direct links to Israel, which has been credibly accused of genocide, or at the restaurant, partly owned by someone running or being a spokesperson of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that has, under whose auspices hundreds of Palestinians have been shot and killed. So it just felt like this op-ed that was kind of by omission concealing the full truth. And so
and demonising protesters.
and demonising protesters.
large.
And
We-
so when you
yeah.
say, well, they shouldn't have protested on Sunday because of these incidents on Friday, well, one of them was someone graffitiing the wall of a weapons company. So why should they not have protested on Sunday?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I understand, the
Well, I just think you need a more substantial reason generally. Like, we have these repeated attacks on protesters, and that's on the one hand demonisation by the media, on the other we've had 50 anti-protest laws in a variety of forms across a variety of jurisdictions, making it harder to protest. And it just feels like putting all the attention on the right to protest, which is a civil liberty and inherent to our democracy, kind of takes the focus away from why are people protesting? What is the issue? The more we demonise and talk about task force and police need to do more, it demonises the protesters, demonises the messenger and forgets the message entirely. And I think that's what my kind of the bigger issue with this is.
Yes, exactly. And there was on the Age's website when this op-ed was published, there was not only was there like no perspective given from the side of the protesters, there was no story about Gaza at all. So you have this kind of very, in my view, skewed sort of reporting. And I'm not saying that they should not have, like their opinion is their opinion, but
It's cooked,
surely
but
if you're
it's their
talking
opinion.
about, protests and protesters, you would hear from one of them, some of them, not sure. Sometimes I feel like with this, like, that David Beckham documentary the one where he did with his wife and she was like, I grew up poor. And then he sticks his head in behind the thing and he's like, be honest.
Yeah. She's like, well, we just had a chauffeur and a Bentley.
She's like, I am being, I feel like, the age is like, there were 3 attacks on Jewish people. And I kind of just want to say, be honest.
Yeah.
Well, I am being honest. No, be honest. Okay, one of them was graffiti on a weapons company. You know what I mean? Like, that's different. There's a point of difference there that I just think was not highlighted in the way that it should.
Yeah, well, that's
my bad news.
Yeah, that is bad news. That's heavy. That's a lot. But I did say to you, in the plate I'm going to bring, I want it to be a bit of a different flavour.
Okay.
So I'm going to look at genocide, just somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, I just thought I'd make it like really different. So just a little pivot. So in recent days, did you see that the Yoorrook Justice Commission found genocide occurred in Victoria? Did you see
that
happened? So the report, for those who haven't come across it, and there's a reason why you may not have, which I'm going to arrive at. So the report found that from 1834, mass killings, disease, sexual violence, the destruction of languages and cultures, and child removals from families and communities combined to, and this is a quote from the report, bring about the near complete physical destruction of First Peoples in Victoria. So this is a landmark Aboriginal-led inquiry. And there were 100 recommendations in the final report, and it included a bunch of things. But one that sort of stuck out was a democratically elected body of First Nations people tasked with treaty making with the state government to be made permanent and to have a bunch of powers extended to shared knowledge. And then there are recommendations about health and justice, education, child protection. But how many people do you reckon, like just a pub test, do you think would have known this had happened or seen it?
That's how long's a piece of string? I don't know. That's a hard question.
Okay, well, I think
I saw it on Instagram. I saw it on The Guardian.
Yes, okay. And so what I ended up doing was, because so few outlets covered it, let alone put it on its social media pages, because it's one thing to cover it. And I think the important thing about media literacy, and media critique, it's not just what is covered and given prominence, as we unpacked with Benjamin Netanyahu, given an entire tile with lacking context, is what isn't given any prominence and what isn't given any coverage and why. And so in Australia, ABC News, NITV, The Guardian covered it, both articles and on their social media pages. Internationally, BBC had it on their website and socials, pretty much going, oh, well, the British did this terrible thing by genocide. And then I really had to search and dig to find it anywhere else. So there was nothing on 7 News, on their news site, or on 7 News Melbourne Instagram, nothing whatsoever. I searched all sorts of words. And this is the same outlet that had lots of reporters at all key locations for the mushroom murder.
Right, sure.
They had not a bit. And I went to 7 News Melbourne because this is a Victorian commission, like a Victorian inquiry. 9 News had one article that I had to dig and find. And this was the headline: Top Cop issues formal apology about ongoing harm. But there was no mention of the word genocide. In fact, you had to trawl
in the article?
In the headline,
right,
or in the first 3 quarters of it. You had to go all the way. I mean, I kind of think that genocide's the lead. I kind of think that it's the headline.
Yeah. Well, if you look at I told you that I saw it on The Guardian. It was like, what I saw was a massive tile, and there was massive font, just one word, and it said genocide.
Yes.
And so, I've got my blinkers out for that word. So I'm like, what is this? And clicked on it. And then it was that story about the Yoorrook Commission.
So 9's framing was that the top cop had apologised for the treatment of Indigenous people by police in Victoria. And then the first, it was all his quotes, and yes, we acknowledge the harm, blah, 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 down, genocide. I'm like,
right, so
kind of missed the top line.
He's apologising for, we just have a wee bit of a scroll, and I'm sure you will find it buried amid other paragraphs as well.
Yep. Herald Sun had nothing on their Instagram. And a couple of podcasts had covered it, 7am, Radio National, Brekkie, Yarning Up. And I guess the point here is I had to really dig for coverage outside of The Guardian, outside of NITV, and outside of the ABC. And there certainly weren't I mean, news articles is one thing. There certainly weren't several pieces and opinion pieces and the Herald's View and calls for task forces and letters to the editor. But there was this trash take from the Daily Mail. Warning, Indigenous compensation for genocide will send Aussie state broke as bombshell plan drops. And so one of the 100 recommendations would have been about a certain amount of compensation for said genocide and dispossession and erasure of First Nations people and taking First Nations children from their families and the ongoing impact. And that, as you can imagine, led to a torrent of 500 horribly racist comments, that the sorts of things and attitudes that continue to harm First Nations people.
So the bad thing here, according to the Mail, is not so much that genocide happened, it's that, we might have to make some kind of reparation for it.
Yes.
Oh, God. I'm so in two minds about even talking about the Daily Mail, honestly, because I just, one, don't want to give them any more oxygen. But two, you're like, they're still a player in the Australian media landscape.
Not just a player. They're often the second most visited digital website. So as much as we want to say, the Daily Fail, or that's, where journalism goes to die, people read it, and there were 500 horrendous comments. So they help kind of feed that division and ugly racism and all the horrible attitudes that continue to harm First Nations people. I just found it astounding that this landmark finding was made. And the other thing that was lacking was maybe an op-ed would be interesting from a First Nations person about genocide, given we are living through another genocide.
Right, yeah.
There are so many ways you could possibly cut this that is relevant to a modern audience, relevant to Australia. Because often say, what's the local angle? Well, the local angle is genocide in Victoria.
Right.
And another angle is also genocide. No.
Are we hugely surprised that Australia doesn't particularly want to reckon with its past? Shock horror, everyone! Australia doesn't want to reckon hugely with its past.
Yeah, no, it's not surprising, but it's still, I don't think it's okay, and I think it needs to be, we need to talk about it. And I'm sure, and many of my First Nations journo friends and just friends, not even journos, will say, they never want to tell our stories, and our stories make people feel guilty about themselves. And sometimes there is this helplessness. Sometimes there is this, that happened before and I feel really bad and I didn't do it. Stay with me, little idea. Another little genocide also happening now. So if it's the whole I had nothing to do with it and I can't stop it and I feel helpless, well, maybe we learn from it. Maybe we stop it from happening again. That brings it into the now, and that kind of shifts that helplessness and guilt, I think. But that is my BYO, bad news.
So we did say at the top of this episode that we were going to look at one of the kind of prevailing ethoses that came out of Antoinette's trial, which was this idea that she shouldn't have been fired, but that you should not have been hired in the first place. And that's,
naughty.
The tacit kind of belief there is that you shouldn't have been hired because you were not impartial, and because you were, if we were to use the words of one Ita Buttrose, an activist journalist. So let us unpack that.
Okay.
And from which corner of the media world that criticism came from.
I mean, all corners, every corner. But I think which probably a good place to start is Media Watch. And to Media Watch's credit, it is the one program, I think, across all of the industry that can kind of criticise its own employer and its own board, and often does, quite a good job. And Paul Barry last year, February 2024, the former host of Media Watch, was the first to cover this, and he rightly slammed the ABC for seeming to buckle. This is well before a verdict. But I want to point to a little section of what he said, because that is kind of a lingering view that I think we need to unpack.
Lattouf had been vocal about the Israel-Gaza war for weeks, and since 7th of October, she'd made it clear where her sympathies lay, posting on Instagram,
"It's hard to keep working and living a normal life knowing one child is being killed in Gaza every 10 minutes by Israeli forces."
On Twitter, now known as X,
"It's time Australian politicians and news editors stop reciting IDF talking points. There's nothing complex about this situation. These are horrific war crimes."
and also on TikTok.
You can and should condemn illegal military occupation of Palestine that's been happening for 75 years.
Now, Lattouf is not a Hamas supporter. She has condemned them as extremists and says every civilian death is a tragedy. But her posts show more concern about the thousands of innocent women and children in Gaza killed by Israeli bombs.
I mean, she sounds awesome. Looking back to all of those clips, I'm like, yes, correct,
okay.
accurate.
So, okay, a couple of things with that, right? Okay, she shouldn't have been fired, but she shouldn't have been hired in the first place. And here are some of the reasons that she shouldn't have been hired in the first place. One, she says it's very hard living a normal life when one child is killed every 10 minutes.
Alarm bells. And he said, like, they should have seen the trouble coming. Am I the trouble?
I mean, I guess you were.
Am I the trouble? Because I care about one child being killed every 10 minutes?
Also, like...
Factual.
I have to pay someone $250 an hour to unpack the fact that I have seen so many dead children in the last 20 months. Like, this is a real thing that quite a lot of real people are going through. And so for that to be the first thing that they point to in terms of we should have seen the trouble coming is like, oh, okay, what's the second one? Oh, well, the second one is that it's time for Australian politicians and news editors to stop reciting IDF talking points. Again, probably, yeah.
Also true, and more like analysis and research is coming out showing the pro-Israel bias. More petitions are being signed by journalists around the world to stop their newsrooms providing PR for Israel and reciting IDF talking points. Also true.
I mean, we just had an example just earlier in the show about the Age platforming Benjamin Netanyahu and giving a wanted war criminal, credibly accused of genocide, their own sort of carousel on Instagram, replete with quote and all.
Yeah, but please continue my third strike, my third naughty girl strike.
Yeah, okay, your third strike, aside from being very sad about dead children and thinking the media should change, the third strike that should have seen the trouble coming was a condemnation of the illegal military occupation.
Which has been happening for decades. Also, completely factual. But the good news is, Jan, Barry did specify that I am not a Hamas supporter.
Oh my God. Okay.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Bazza.
It's just so interesting what it's come off the back of. Like, okay, being sad about children, changing the media, condemning the illegal military. So it's like, now, if you thought that makes Antoinette Lattouf a Hamas supporter, let me tell you that she's not.
Good to know.
But my question is, like, why would you think that she was? Like, why are you trying to kind of caveat or legitimize the criticism that would suggest that she is? You know, like, it was just a very kind of conspicuous thing to have in there. Because my first question was like, oh, I'm sorry, who thinks she's a Hamas supporter?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what evidence do you have that might be a legitimate criticism that you then have to debunk? I'm not sure. It was just very, very confusing.
But then 2025, new year, new Media Watch host, Linton Besser. Let's listen to what he had to say.
What's now clear is the ABC's first misstep occurred long before she walked into a studio, because no one at the ABC had bothered to thoroughly consider her social media feed. And since the Hamas attack on Israel, she'd taken a clear and unequivocal position in favour of the Palestinian people.
You can and should condemn illegal military occupation of Palestine. That's been happening for 75 years.
But having made the decision to hire her, the ABC then owed Antoinette Lattouf a fair go.
Okay, well, I mean, again, it's just that sort of same argument that, okay, she'd taken a position in favour of the Palestinian people, but what examples do you have that you had taken a position in favour of the Palestinian people that are not examples just based on fact?
And based on every human rights organisation and international law expert. The Palestinian people are I don't think this is the correct term, but the recipients of the genocide, the victims of the genocide. They are the children who are being killed every 10 minutes. They are the journalists being killed at rates we've never seen before.
Yeah, the medical workers, the healthcare workers.
Like this is they are the ones unlawfully occupied. Like if both sides were unlawfully occupied, if both sides had 200 journalists killed, if both sides had children, you'd go, oh well, this is. But also, like my starting position of being sympathetic to Palestinian people seemed to be the problem, which makes me question: does the starting point have to be pro-Israel to be acceptable?
There is another option, which is that you could have just been silent.
Yes.
Right? That's the other option, because it seems like, and again, okay, just to come back to, because I keep coming back to this question of like, what did you say that was so egregious that warrants that you should not have been hired in the first place? And speaking of Media Watch, let's just stay on that track for a second, because Jonathan Holmes, who was a former presenter of Media Watch and now is the head of ABC Alumni, wrote a piece where he said that since October 7, Lattouf had been busy. In a barrage of posts, she lambasted the Western press coverage for the conflict as blatantly favouring Israel. So again, calling out media coverage. She'd ferociously attacked the Netanyahu government. And the word ferociously attacked is a point to...
Yes, because like who's doing ferocious attacking at the moment? Is it me or the IDF? But yeah, okay, cool. Let me be the ferocious attacker. Cool.
Sure, but the language there is, it's quite emotive. She ferociously attacked the Netanyahu government, accusing its radical minister for defence and others of genocide. I mean, you're not the one that's accused them of genocide. There have been some very credible organisations, institutions, scholars, human rights groups that have accused them of that. And also, those radical ministers for defence have since been sanctioned by the Australian government.
And some of those radical ministers of defence are convicted terrorists.
Oh, sure, there is.
So, I mean...
There is that.
Come on.
And then the third thing that he brought up was that you had co-authored an article in Crikey that revealed that New South Wales police found no proof that demonstrators at the Opera House were chanting an anti-Semitic chant, "Gas the Jews." The police later confirmed that to be the case. So again, this idea, okay, she shouldn't have been hired in the first place because, checks notes, she called out Western press, has been critical of the Netanyahu government and did a journalism.
Yep.
Right? So I'm just struggling as to what it was that was so egregious. And it just seems to me not so much what you said, but the fact that you said it at all, and maybe even like the volume of things you said, the number of things you said, the consistency of things you said. I'm really not sure exactly what it is.
I think it's obviously these all predate my time on ABC, and like you and I were at the time, and I guess continue to be, we're freelancers, we're independent. Part of, I guess, our appeal is that we bring an audience, we have a social media following, we do a bunch of things. We don't do kind of like straight news journalism per se. We don't work in newsrooms. I wasn't hired to go and be a reporter on 7:30. I was hired as, I guess, a personality and a presenter in local radio, which is separate from news. So again, pray tell, why should I have not been hired in the first place? Does having those views make me unable to play music, do talkback calls and talk about Christmas pudding? Like, and the fact that 3 Media Watch hosts, all men, 2 of a similar age, all come to this view that I was just troublesome and that I should never have been hired, and then cite examples. It's like, well, here we are. Here's a bag of
egregious things.
And they're not egregious. Well, do you think that any of them are egregious, or just the fact that I said them was egregious?
I mean, this is sort of what I'm trying to find out and what I would like some clarification on, because think about the implications of this, right? If the ABC should not have hired somebody that is outspoken about what exactly?
Well,
is it now that anyone who has an opinion about anything suddenly has a red mark next to their name at the ABC?
It's an opinion about this, because we see presenters and journalists have opinion about a raft of things. It's just as though you cannot have this particular opinion.
But I think that there would be people who would suggest that if you're a journalist, and again, you weren't doing journalism when you were on the show, but let's just say if you're a journalist, then you should just let the work speak for itself and not express any personal opinions anywhere at any point. Now, that works to some extent, but it will rub up and cause some friction with the kind of the modern world and the increasing fragmentation of the workforce that we see, right? So it's not like you have a journo that goes into the ABC now as a cadet, moves through that pipeline, goes regional, does this show, does that show, works way up to presenter or whatever it is. It's just not linear in the same way anymore. What you have is a fragmenting of the workforce. So people have one job here, they might have a job there, they might have 2 jobs going on at once. They might be building their own social social media presence and platforms, because remember, news organisations highly encourage journos to do this at one point.
Well, historically they did, yes. Now they're a bit confused, which we're going to get to in a moment.
Well,
yeah.
exactly. But also there's a pedigree or a certain degree of, prominence or respect or appreciation, I don't know what the word is, for people that have built their own followers and their own audiences. And you see that throughout media, arts and entertainment. You know, people go to those that already have a solidified audience to then bring them onto TV or to bring them onto established media to do work there, right? So they kind of want someone who has an established audience, but they don't want the person who has an established audience to do the thing that they established the audience by doing.
And they want somebody to be diverse, but not too diverse in that they dare to bring their diversity to work, because that, according to Jonathan Holmes, brings a lot of problems. So let's have a listen. This is an interview he did on Radio National with Patricia Karvelis in January 2024. It was a 12-minute interview. This is just at the end.
I think they just got to sit down and they've got to sort out this diversity thing. They've got to find a better way of combining these two actually almost conflicting notions of objectivity and diversity.
Are they conflicting? Why do you think they conflict?
Well, I mean, yes, I think they can be in conflict.
Okay.
He said the quiet bit out loud.
Which is that diversity and impartiality cannot coexist.
Yeah.
Which is that if you're a diverse journo, which really is just code for black and brown journo,
yes,
you can't possibly be impartial.
Yeah, so you can't be trusted to be able to, deal with all of your diversity and all of your feelings and all of your identity. You can't possibly be trusted to still be able to do your job. And that was the real problem, that I was a problem because I had that view and because I'd expressed that view and because I have this different view, which you're meant to have in a newsroom, and I dared express it. And that takes me back to the original and acceptable starting point. Is it pro-Israel? And then when you deviate from that, you're the problem. Even if the facts are with you and the human rights organisations and the international law is with you and the body of evidence is with you, that is the issue.
Well, I think the interesting question is put aside whether or not it's pro-Israel, which is a key question, but even if the position is one of neutrality or silence, is that also just pro-Israel? At what point does neutrality actually help the perpetrator? Yeah. And that's kind of the key question, because I think most journalists would say, we're not pro this and we're not pro that. We're actually neutral. We're just straight down the middle. We're just objective. And there's an argument to be made that sort of neutrality actually assists the perpetrator.
I think it's essential then to take a little bit of time to examine what the lessons may be out of this Lattouf saga for the industry. And we got a bit of a taste of what some outlets are suggesting the takeaway is. And so Bevan Shields, in another Herald's view, he is the editor of the Sydney Morning Herald, the headline is that the ruling shows a need for a truly impartial ABC. So when I read that, I was like, yeah, I mean, the judge categorically found that they were pressured by pro-Israel lobbyists. Here's the first paragraph, though. Antoinette Lattouf's court victory over the ABC has exposed terrible misjudgment by senior management and opened the door to emboldening staff and contracted talent to publicly express political opinions. What the hell did I just read?
I mean, we know what the takeaway from this is. Not just for the Herald and the Herald's view, but for everyone, which is just, we're just not going to hire anyone that we think might cause us any kind of problem at any point ever. And who is that going to net? It's going to net people, well, I mean, given the most gracious interpretation, it's probably going to net people with some kind of balls, chutzpah, thought about something that deviates from the status quo.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, speaking truth to power, all the things we are meant to do. But it's well, we like this whole diversity idea. You can bring your melanin into the room, but nothing else. And so those who remain, I suspect, are going to be even more frightened because they're going to be more policed and more watched. The real lesson here is those damn staff members
should not
have a political opinion, because independent always. The Australian had a similar take, that Lattouf's win opens the door for freedom of political expression, was their headline. And And obviously the Australian played a role in helping apply pressure and orchestrate. Here's the opening paragraph. The victory for the sacked ABC presenter has unleashed a powerful new legal principle that could give a green light to those who would use the workplace as a political pulpit.
Yeah, the political pulpit line is interesting because I think we kind of forget that we have a long and storied history of journalists who had previously worked for politicians, then moving into journalism. Like, you have journalists who are stalwarts of journalism, like Kerry O'Brien.
Yeah.
I think Barry Cassidy worked for Bob Hawke.
And then they went into political commentary roles. I went and played music. How? In what political pulpit? My music selection? The talkback callers? Do I screen them for their political allegiance?
But it's just
so nonsense.
Arbitrarily applied, isn't it? It's like we're so worried that this might be used, the workplace might be used as a political pulpit. And it's like, but we've had so many journalists who've literally come from a political pulpit. Like, literally were spin doctors for politicians who now work in newsrooms and who now are journalists and who are actually considered as, you know, statesmen and women of the craft. And there's never this fear that they will use the workplace as a political pulpit. Quite the opposite. They're feted and rewarded and, you know, honoured. But an individual posting a Human Rights Watch post and critiquing the Australian media and Israeli defence ministers who have been sanctioned by Australia and having done journalism, you are the real fear of using the workplace as the political pulpit.
Yeah, and
it's just weird.
And not lobbyists. The top line and the takeaway should be lobbyists.
Using the ABC as a political pulpit of some kind. Right.
And withstanding that sort of pressure.
Anyway, I'm none the clearer on why you shouldn't have been hired in the first place.
I was a mouthy, opinionated person that didn't like children being blown up. It's very problematic, Jan.
I mean, again, this is helpful for venting and for catharsis, and I appreciate that, and I'm here for it. But it just does not help explain like what was so egregious that you should not have been hired in the first place. It just seems to me that it's because you said something. Doesn't really matter exactly what you said. It's because you said something. Maybe the sum of it all would lead one to believe that you had a position, but that position was based in fact the whole time. And frankly, the court has found that it's your position to have and you're entitled to have it and you can't be sacked because of it.
Yeah.
And so I fear now that the takeaway from all of this is like, great, cool. We're just going to stay away from anyone that has any opinion. And that is going to be our main takeaway from here. And I'm sure it's going to be fine.
But more than that, it's because we can't, as diverse people, a la the Jonathan Holmes school of thought, have an opinion and still be objective. It's that our diversity renders our objectivity compromised, because plenty of people at the ABC have opinions on a range of issues, but they're okay. They can manage it. They're cool. They're not compromised by us, like us, in our ability to both have an opinion and be good at our jobs, because our feeble brown brains can't do it.
So you shouldn't have been hired in the first place.
Yes. I do want to take a moment to give a shout out to, again, this is a segment which I thought, you know, we can give a gold star or at least a bit of recognition to people doing interesting work or surprising work. It's also kind of so we don't just look like cranky cows all the time. There are a couple of people throughout this whole ordeal which I guess they stepped out of their prescribed tents or ideological camps and backed me. Or backed the right to have a political opinion. And that's Ben Fordham from 2GB. So that's for those out of Sydney, Talkback, we call them shock jocks, I guess so.
Yeah,
Talkback,
sure.
shock jock.
Okay, yeah.
He heavily criticised how I was treated, the ABC bungling it, how it was a waste of money and how it was embarrassing. And he never questioned why I was ever hired in the first place. Then there was Tom Switzer from the Centre of Independent Studies, which is a conservative think tank. He wrote a piece in the Daily Telegraph. He also wrote a piece in the Australian. He went on Sky News, I guess defending me. We do know each other, but just, you know, he doesn't necessarily agree with all of my opinions, but I should have a right to express it, that I was treated appallingly by the ABC, also citing double standards in which other journalists at the ABC or personalities are allowed to have opinions, but I am not.
Just a minor caveat with these two, though. Is it just that they hate the ABC more than they want to defend you. I'm just putting that out there. Because the ABC is like not their greatest love.
Possibly.
So any way they can find to stick the boot into the ABC, my hunch is they'd happily do it.
Sure.
So it could be part of all
Well,
of that.
there was an article in The Australian last year, December 2024, in defence of Lattouf. Tom Switzer wrote, silencing her wasn't the answer. And here is where I think it might push back against that question of yours or that view, because he takes a little swing at conservatives. Conservatives and genuine liberals rightly condemn cancel culture, but we've been curiously absent in defending Antoinette Lattouf. This is not just laying the boot into the ABC. This is also calling the cancel culture peeps and those who defend freedom of speech, except not this speech by this person.
Right.
There was also Josh Sepps, former ABC radio presenter and now independent podcaster. He came out on X saying that we disagree a lot about Israel and Gaza. It would be easy for me to celebrate her firing as some pro-Israel free speech hypocrites are doing, but I won't. She is driven by reason, facts and honest judgment. And a shout out to that, but because there was an alarming amount of ABC personalities and presenters who did no such thing privately or publicly. So I think that is worth noting and it was appreciated.
Well, there you go. I think, that is a reasonable shout out for you to make today of the people that supported you somewhat surprisingly or unexpectedly in a way that, I don't know, you felt buoyed by. So good for you. Speaking of people that didn't say anything, that's a segue, all of these people who did say something, the one or perhaps two people that I have found conspicuously absent in these last few weeks since your judgment was handed down have been the Prime Minister and the Communications Minister. I did expect them to say something.
Yeah, Albo, where are you at? Because the ABC spent in excess of $2 million of taxpayer money on a case, an unwinnable case that caused enormous damage, but nothing? Isn't there going to be an envoy? I want an envoy announced.
An envoy to combat.
I don't know.
Girl, you're not getting shit.
Well, maybe not an envoy, but a tweet, a statement of concern.
And you're sure he said nothing?
No, I've had a look. I've been trawling the new communications minister, Annika Wells' socials pages, and I haven't seen it being put to her. So, okay, if you can't give an envoy, give a statement, give an ounce of, I don't know, the care about the public broadcaster, which is answerable to the Australian public and your public purse. I find it curious
and conspicuous.
Yeah.
On that point, I think we have to wrap up for the day because we've gone longer than what I thought we've gone. Thank you to everybody who has stuck around right up until the end of this episode. We so greatly appreciate your support and we hope to see you at the next episode of We Used to Be Journos, which will have a slightly, well, I'm not going to say it's going to be hugely different, but I think we're going to be talking less about Antoinette Lattouf in the next episode.
Yes,
I think we've done our talking.
No, we have. That's enough.
Yeah.
I accept that and I accept that I won't get an envoy. We Used to Be Journos is part of EP Media. That's our new independent media company and we can only keep doing this work with your support. So if you go to epmedia.com, you can subscribe and that helps us to keep mouthing off.
Yes, well, to keep critiquing the media in a fair and balanced and analytical way. Yep. I think that's what you meant to say.
That is what I meant to say.
Okay, good. Yes, please do that. Please go over to our website, etmedia.com. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Mm-hmm. That would be very, very helpful. You can give us a good rating on any of the podcast apps that you're listening to this podcast on. A 5-star rating, please. And also, if you want to leave a lovely review, we would be much obliged. Otherwise, you can follow us on our various social media platforms, including Facebook, TikTok, and of course Instagram. And finally, a massive shout out to all of the people that make this podcast possible, which is ourselves and the men that we are married to and are under some kind of contractual obligation to make it happen. But also to our awesome, wonderful composer Jai Pine, who composed our opening tune and the tune that you're probably listening to now.
We love it. Thank you. Thank you, Jai.
Thank you, Jai. You can find Jai on Instagram, Jai Daniel Pine. Go and check him out. Give him a follow. Head on over to him for all of your musical needs as well. Thank you, Jai.
If you do come across something that you would like us to critique or analyse or have some questions about, please hit us up. You can hit us up on any of the platforms because we do love a good dibby-dobber. We can't wait to hear your tips.
Well, we do love a good observant and...
Why are you being so much more
polite?
Well,
I'm not. We're not, observant and media critical person.
Catch you next
Dibby Dobber in
Wednesday.
comments in brackets.
Catch you next Wednesday.
Bye.